Welcome, friends, to another update. I want to speak to you today about a story that is appearing in the business press, a story that many of you might have glanced at and moved past because it seems on the surface to be a matter of logistics, a matter of travel schedules, a matter of where people are choosing to go on their summer holidays. But I am here to tell you that if you look at this story through the lens of economic analysis, if you look at it with an understanding of how capitalism functions as a global system, you will see that this is not a story about airplanes. It is a story about the structural decline of an empire. It is a story about the movement of capital, and it is a stark, flashing warning light regarding the economic reality of the United States in 2026. We are looking at a report, a very significant report, detailing the decisions made by major Canadian airlines, specifically Air Transat and WestJet, to slash their flight capacity to the United States. Now, let us be very precise about what is happening here so we can understand the gravity of the contradiction. We are seeing a reduction in flights by millions of seats. We are seeing Air Transat suspend its last remaining flights to the United States for the summer season entirely. We are seeing WestJet, a major carrier, cutting 15 city pairs. They are stopping flights from Halifax to Orlando, from Vancouver to Washington, D.C., from Edmonton to Nashville. The capitalist press, they will try to tell you this is a redeployment of assets. They will use euphemisms. They will say it is a strategic adjustment. But let us translate that into plain English. Let us translate that into the language of the working class and the reality of the market. What this means is that the Canadian consumer, the Canadian working class, is voting with their dollars, and they are voting against the United States economy. Capital, in the form of these airline corporations, is looking at the United States, a market that for 70 years was the automatic default destination for Canadian leisure capital. And they are saying, no, there is no profit there anymore. The demand has collapsed. You have to ask yourself the question, why? Why is this happening now? In standard economics, supply follows demand. If the demand is there, the corporations will climb over each other to provide the supply. The fact that they are pulling out, the fact that they are taking those airplanes and moving them to Europe, moving them to North Africa, moving them to domestic routes within Canada, tells you that the United States has become too expensive, too unstable, and too unattractive for the average person to visit. This is a symptom of the inflation that has ravaged the US dollar, making it impossible for visitors to afford the basic commodities of tourism, hotels, food, transportation. It is the economic wall that has been built around the US, just as real and just as damaging as any physical wall. But we must go deeper. We must look at this dialectically. This is not just about prices. This is about the totalizing experience of a society in decline. When you have a political administration such as the one led by Donald Trump in this year of 2026 that prioritizes isolationism, that prioritizes a rhetoric of hostility, that prioritizes an economic nationalism that disrupts trade flows and spikes tariffs, you create an environment that repels the rest of the world. The airline executives, they are not socialists. They are not doing this for political reasons. They are doing this because they are profit maximizers. They look at the spreadsheets and they see that the Canadian family looks at the United States and sees a place of social unrest, a place of exorbitant cost, and a place that frankly does not want them. So the airline takes its capital, the physical airplane, the labor of the pilots and the flight attendants, and it moves it elsewhere. This is the ruthlessness of the market that the pro-capitalist cheerleaders always forget works both ways. It works against you just as easily as it works for you. Think about what this means for the local economies in the United States. Think about the hotel workers in Florida. Think about the taxi drivers in Nashville. Think about the restaurant servers in Washington, D.C. These are workers who depend on the inflow of foreign capital, on the spending of tourists to pay their rent, to feed their children. When WestJet cancels a route from Vancouver to D.C., that is millions of dollars that simply evaporates from the local economy of the American capital. It is a withdrawal of support. It is a sanction, not by a government, but by the market itself. The United States is being sanctioned by the preferences of the global consumer. And because the United States has spent decades hollowing out its productive capacity, sending its manufacturing jobs overseas, relying instead on a service economy, relying on financialization and tourism, when that tourism dries up, there is nothing left to fall back on. This is the fragility of the system that we have been warning about for years. We have to understand that this is how empires end. They do not usually end with a bang, with a sudden explosion. They end with a whimper. They end because people stop coming. They end because the trade routes shift. They end because the currency becomes toxic or the cost of doing business becomes too high. You are seeing a reorientation of the North American continent. For a century, the economic gravity pulled everything south. Canada was economically an appendage of the United States market. What you are seeing now with these airlines shifting capacity to Europe and North Africa is a decoupling. Canada is looking across the Atlantic. They are looking to the rest of the world, bypassing the United States. This is a geopolitical catastrophe for the U.S. ruling class, even if they are too arrogant to admit it in their nightly news broadcasts. Let us also talk about the specific companies involved here, because it illustrates the anarchy of production that Marx wrote about. Each of these airlines is acting in its own individual, rational self-interest. It makes sense for Air Transat to leave the U.S. market if they cannot fill the seats. It is a rational decision for the individual capitalist, but collectively, for the United States economy, it is irrational. It creates a downward spiral. Fewer flights mean fewer visitors. Fewer visitors mean businesses close. Businesses closing means higher unemployment in the U.S. service sector. Higher unemployment means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means the infrastructure continues to crumble, making the destination even less attractive. It is a vicious cycle, a feedback loop of decline that the free market cannot fix, because the free market is the mechanism that is causing it. And do not let them tell you this is just about summer schedules. That is the language of the bureaucrat trying to hide the disaster. When you suspend a route, you are destroying the infrastructure of connection. You are laying off the ground staff who handled those flights. You are canceling the contracts with the catering companies. You are severing the economic arteries. To reestablish those connections takes years, if it ever happens at all. This is a structural break. It suggests that the Canadian airline industry and the data analysts who work for them have looked at the long-term projection for the U.S. economy under this administration, and they have decided it is not going to get better. It is going to get worse. We are getting out now. This is reminiscent of what we saw in the decline of the British Empire, where trade routes that used to center on London began to bypass it. Capital is a coward. Capital runs away from instability. Capital runs away from declining rates of profit. And right now, the United States, with its political chaos, its massive inequality, its crumbling public safety, and its inflated currency, is flashing red warning signals to capital investors everywhere, including the capital investors who run airlines in Calgary and Montreal. They are taking their planes and they are going to Europe, where despite all the problems in Europe, there is at least a functioning social contract. There is a stability that allows for the predictability of tourism. What we are witnessing is the isolation of the American working class. The American worker is being cut off from the world, first through tariffs and trade wars that make foreign goods expensive, now through the physical reduction of transport links that brings foreign money in. It is a siege, but it is a siege imposed from within by an economic system that prioritizes the short-term profits of a few over the stability of the whole. The irony, of course, is palpable. You have an administration that screams America first, that wants to build walls, that wants to be alone, while the global market is granting them their wish. They are getting exactly what they asked for. The world is leaving them alone. The Canadians are going to Portugal, they are going to Morocco, they are going to Spain, they are not coming to Florida. We must look now at the mechanism of this withdrawal, because it is not enough to simply say flights are canceled. We have to ask, what is the economic logic that drives a corporation like WestJet or Air Transat to abandon a market of 350 million people? You see, in the boardrooms of these airline companies, they do not care about the American flag. They do not care about the speeches made in Washington. They care about the rate of profit. And here is the hard truth that the American media refuses to tell you. The rate of profit to be made from flying Canadians to the United States has collapsed. Why? Because the cost of being in the United States, the cost of ground handling, the cost of landing fees, the cost of fuel, and crucially, the cost for the passengers once they arrive, has skyrocketed beyond the capacity of the average working class family to pay. This is what we call in economics a realization crisis. The American service economy, the hotels in Florida, the theme parks in California, the casinos in Nevada, they have produced a product. They have built the rooms, they have hired the staff, they have prepared the meals, but they cannot realize the profit embodied in those commodities because they cannot sell them, and they cannot sell them because the price has been driven up by a decade of inflationary corporate greed that has hollowed out the purchasing power of the very people they rely on. The Canadian worker, whose wages have been stagnant just like the American workers, looks at the price of a week in Myrtle Beach, converts that into Canadian dollars, and realizes that for the same amount of money, they can go to Portugal, they can go to Greece, they can go to Morocco. And so the airline, acting as the rational agent of capital, moves the airplane. But let us dig deeper into this inflation. You are told by the Federal Reserve, you are told by the pundits, that inflation is a mysterious weather event. It just happens. But we know better. The prices in the United States are high because the monopoly corporations that control the hospitality and energy sectors have used their market power to jack up prices far in excess of their costs. They have engaged in a class war against the consumer. They said, we will squeeze every last dime out of you. And for a while, it worked. But now they have hit the wall. They have squeezed the Canadian tourist until there is nothing left to squeeze. And the result is not that the corporations lower their prices. Oh no, they are too addicted to those margins. The result is that the customer simply disappears. The market clears, but it clears at zero. The flights stop. The connection is broken. And consider the irony of the political situation in 2026. You have a Donald Trump administration that ran on a platform of America first. They told you they would bring the jobs back. They told you they would make the world respect America again. Well, look at the reality. When you pursue a policy of aggressive economic nationalism, when you threaten your neighbors with tariffs, when you treat your allies as enemies, you create a psychological and economic environment of hostility. The Canadian public is not stupid. They watch the news, they see the chaos, they see the guns, they see the social unrest, and they vote with their feet. They say, I do not feel welcome there. I do not feel safe there. And I certainly do not want to give my hard-earned money to that system. So America first becomes America alone. The isolationism that was preached as a political strategy has become an economic reality. The world is turning away, and do not think for a second that this is limited to Canadians. If the Canadians, who are culturally and geographically the closest to the U.S., are pulling out, what do you think the Europeans are doing? What do you think the Asians are doing? We are witnessing the slow, agonizing decoupling of the United States from the global tourism economy. This is a form of deglobalization, but it is not the kind that helps the American worker. It is the kind that leaves the American worker stranded in a shrinking economy with fewer customers, fewer tips, and fewer hours. Let's talk about that American worker, the hotel maid in Orlando, the bus driver in Las Vegas, the server in Phoenix. These people are the collateral damage of this airline retreat. When WestJet cuts 15 city pairs, that is hundreds of thousands of visitors who are not coming. That means empty hotel rooms. That means empty tables at the restaurant. And in the ruthless logic of American capitalism, what happens when demand drops? The boss does not take a pay cut. The shareholders do not skip a dividend. No, they cut the labor. They lay off the maid. They cut the shift of the server. They create a new wave of unemployment in the very states that can least afford it. This is the cruelty of the system. The decision is made in a boardroom in Calgary or Montreal based on a spreadsheet showing declining yields. But the pain is felt in the kitchen of a working-class family in Florida who suddenly cannot pay the rent. The system connects us all, but it connects us in a way that makes us vulnerable to the whims of capital without giving us any say in how that capital is deployed. If the workers in Florida and the workers in Canada could talk to each other, they might figure out a way to maintain travel that is affordable and sustainable, but they are kept apart. They are atomized, and so they are both victims of a market that cares only for profit. We must also look at where these planes are going. They are going to Europe, to North Africa. Why? Because despite all of Europe's problems, and they have many, there is still a functioning social infrastructure there. There is public transport that works. There is a healthcare system that does not bankrupt you if you twist your ankle. There is a sense of social solidity that has evaporated in the United States. Capital is running to safety. It is running to stability. And right now, the United States, with its crumbling bridges, its mass shootings, its polarized politics, and its predatory pricing, looks like a high-risk gamble. The Canadian airline executives are essentially saying the United States is a bad investment. This is a signal. It is a flashing red light on the dashboard of the American empire. Throughout history, when empires go into decline, the trade routes shift. The periphery stops coming to the center. Rome saw this. The British Empire saw this. The ports that used to be full become empty. The roads that used to be crowded become quiet. We are seeing the early stages of that process here. The American century was built on the idea that everyone wanted to come to America. Everyone wanted to buy American. Everyone wanted to be part of the American system. What happens when the answer changes to no thanks? The corporate media will try to spin this. They will tell you it is just a seasonal adjustment. They will tell you it is about aircraft availability. Do not believe them. You do not cut billions of dollars of capacity because of a seasonal adjustment. You do it because the structural demand is gone. You do it because the model is broken. The model of the U.S. as a mass market destination for the world's middle class is broken. It has become a boutique destination for the ultra rich and a no go zone for everyone else. And what is the response from the U.S. government? Are they addressing the root causes? Are they trying to fix the infrastructure? Are they trying to lower the cost of living? Are they trying to reduce the violence? No. They are cutting taxes for the rich again. They are deregulating the banks again. They are building more walls. They are doing the exact opposite of what is needed. They are accelerating the decline. It is like a doctor treating a patient with a fever by putting them in an oven. The tragedy here is that the United States has so much potential. It has beautiful landscapes, vibrant cities, a creative population, but all of that is being strangled by a capitalist system that prioritizes short term extraction over long term sustainability. The airline cuts are just the symptom. The disease is a system that eats its own tail, a system that makes its own cities unlivable and then wonders why nobody wants to visit them. So, what is to be done? We cannot just sit back and watch the decline. We have to understand that this is a systemic failure that requires a systemic solution. We need to democratize our economy. We need to take the decisions about investment and production out of the hands of the few who are only interested in profit and put them into the hands of the many who are interested in well being. Imagine if we had a tourism industry that was run for the benefit of the communities it serves and the people who travel rather than for the quarterly returns of a hedge fund. We could have affordable travel. We could have stable jobs. We could have a society that welcomes the world instead of pushing it away. But until we make that change, until we confront the reality of our economic system, we will continue to see stories like this. We will see more airlines pulling out. We will see more factories closing. We will see more isolation. The choice is ours. We can continue down this path of decline and division, or we can wake up, organize, and build a future where the economy serves us instead of us serving it. The Canadian planes flying to Europe instead of the US are trying to tell us something. Are we listening? Thank you for joining me. I hope this analysis helps you see through the headlines and understand the deeper forces at work. This is Richard Wolff reminding you that another world is possible, but we have to fight for it.